very happy to introduce Amanda Cassidy, who is joining us tonight for an author chat. And you're going to start us off with an introduction to yourself and Breaking.
Hi everyone, I'm really delighted to be here tonight. So my name is Amanda Cassidy. I'm a journalist turned crime author, and I've just written my debut, which is called Breaking. And Breaking is the story of an Irish mum who loses her child on a Florida beach. They're on holidays in the Coral Beach Resort, which is in the Florida Keys. And 8-year-old Alana Fitzpatrick goes missing while her mum Mirren is in a bar drinking at the time. And the media turns on her for having left her child unsupervised. And then the detective tasked with finding the little girl is called Antonio Role. And he is also having his own problems because his wife is struggling to settle into life on Kite Island, where the book is set. And he's also he's kind of been banished from Miami after a violent incident in his work. And so while the media and the public have turned on the sins of the mother, only Antonio Role is asking the question, which is, where is little Alana Fitzpatrick?
So you've already got a hello from Sam and
I'm
Leslie.
sorry.
We've already got
Lovely.
a hello from Sam and Leslie.
Hi, everyone.
You do such a good intro to the book, and it's like it's kind of difficult to talk about without giving away too many spoilers, isn't it? I guess. But there's like a really nice small cast of characters, which I quite like. It's quite sort of tight knit in that you get the family and the detective, and there's not that many more people.
Yeah, I think I wanted to keep it quite intimate because it's intimate anyway, because you're in the main character, Mirren's head the whole time during the book. Oh, well, the whole time it's her scenes in the book. So I wanted the reader to be in her head quite intimately, especially at the start when she's running up and down the beach trying to find her daughter and kind of she's hating herself too because she feels like she's deserved this because she's felt like a bad mother her whole life for various reasons. I think I could say it without giving spoilers, but she has two daughters, one who's biological and one who's adopted, and she's always felt a lot of guilt that she's never admitted to herself before. She's worried that she loves her biological daughter a little bit more, which is a controversial enough stance. But I think favoritism in children, I think, is something that mothers, we don't like to ever admit or talk about. So but the small cast of characters, I suppose, for my debut, I felt like that was the world that I want to create was more intimate, and I could really get into the characters in that way, especially Antonio Role. So the story is told from his point of view, investigating the case in the third person, and then Mirren in the first person, and I've tried to intersperse those narratives.
We've got some hellos from Francesca and Laura as well.
Hi Francesca, hi Laura. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Now, when you were writing it, what inspired the story? You told me a really nice story about what inspired the story when we were doing the promo. So,
I forgot. No, I'm just kidding. There's Milt's Pixie. So during lockdown we spent some time abroad in Spain as my husband worked there, and we would do homeschool in the morning, and then we'd sit on these very deserted beaches in the afternoons, and there was like beach bars along the beach. So I was sitting in a beach bar watching the kids playing and just jumping up and down the waves, and at one stage my son ducked out of sight and I couldn't see him, and I remember just standing up and just my stomach dropped, and just the horror of, oh Jesus, if I lost him. So that kind of got me thinking about, that I was thinking I'd like to write a book, and I was thinking about writing fiction, and I was thinking, God, that's the ultimate horror story that could have happened. So I took my son's homeschool copy that was there, the dreaded homeschool, and I wrote what's the opening chapter now, roughly the opening chapter of Breaking on the back of his homeschool copy. And then I was just so excited about the story that I just went back and just started writing it. And then each day from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, pretty much every day of that lockdown, the second kind of lockdown from January to March, I wrote 1,000 words a day on the book, and then I'd go to the beach and just watch my kids and make sure I was watching them. But the idea that something could happen to them on my watch, I found that really overwhelming. So I just felt it would make the basis of quite a powerful thriller.
It's a good excuse for your kid not giving in their home schoolwork as well, isn't it? Sorry, miss, I had to leave it with my mum. because
No, I think after a couple of weeks we just gave up the homeschool, and I sorry, I have a bit of a cough at the moment, so um but yeah, we kind of abandoned homeschool after a while. I was like, if you can do your tables and if we read every now and again, my kids are relatively young, so I was like, no, let's just get through this. And I was really keen to see if I could channel this creativity that I was suddenly feeling for the first time this strongly. And I don't know if it was because of lockdown or because we had a quite a big bereavement in our family the summer before. So I don't know what it was that suddenly made this time right to be able to write a book. And I'm still trying to figure out why that was. Um, but I enjoyed the creation of my own world when everything else was very uncertain around me.
I don't think you're the only person that gave up homeschooling. I'm a teacher, and we hated doing it. Just essentially told some of our kids that if they couldn't do it, as long as they were doing like kind of living skills, like making their own lunches, loading the washing machine, things like that, that counted.
I think something had to give at some stage along the way, and we were all just trying to make it work, weren't we?
Yeah, including us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
exactly.
behind the scenes, it was crazy. Um, so you've got that. You're writing book two. What can you tell us about book two?
So book two, also very exciting. So I spent the last 2 weeks or so talking about breaking, which has been amazing. And I think that's probably why I'm now a little bit sick from just the adrenaline rush of it and then the crash, I suppose. But book two is I just got the second round of edits back. It's also a police procedural story, similar to Breaking in that way. And it's about the impact of a crime on family dynamics, which I find very, very interesting. How those relationships can change and swirl after something dramatic happens. Um, but it's out in July, and it's about a house fire and something sinister that happens in a house fire. And I think the reason that it was inspired by that, or what it was inspired by, is that we had here in our house a pretty serious house fire when my youngest daughter was just 7. Sorry, was she was a newborn. She's 7 now. And we came. Well, luckily we weren't here, but we came home. We drove home from a day out, and there was 8-foot flames just coming from the roof of our house, and it was like something out of an apocalypse or something. And we just had the newborn in our arms, and we were like, my hands were shaking. We were calling 999, and and then the house was just completely destroyed. It was just heartbreaking. So I think that I'd always had that in my head as something that, again, like when I was on the beach imagining my children missing, just like the horror of, God, what would that have been like, and then if what if there had been something more sinister involved.
That's interesting. Is it hard? I mean, you kind of made life a bit harder for yourself, didn't you? In that Breaking's quite standalone, so you couldn't really. Were you tempted to carry on with the detective, or were you just like, no?
Now I am, because now the reaction, everybody just loves Antonio Roles so much. So like, in a way, I was like, oh, Antonio, I'd love to write under maybe like an extra chapter, that could just release about his life, just because I was so fond of him as a character. But no, I never aimed to write a series at that stage, and it just hadn't entered my mind, just for lack of kind of, as a new debut author, I didn't even kind of think about series. I was just writing this book. But when I got the 2 book deal, then I was like, because I'm a journalist and I've been at cases and I've been at crime scenes, and I worked in radio and TV. And I think I'd always be at these, interviewing these people who've had this awful thing happen to them, or this crime happen to them, or be standing outside a scene when, a violent scene where the police are surrounding it and you're trying to get information. And I think I always like left those scenarios, drove home or closed my laptop, and just felt like, God, could you imagine? Could you imagine that happened? But I was never satisfied with the endings of what actually happened. So I just thought it would be kind of fun, I suppose, to see what would happen if I could imagine those endings. Or I know with a lot of crimes, even as a reporter, you can't even report what's actually happening. You have to say things like, a person known to the family has been arrested, even though it might have been the sister that had done this awful crime. So I just think it just the license with fiction to go and just write whatever you wanted about a certain scene or crime. I just found that really freeing and really creative, I suppose, to be able to do that.
Francesca's So congratulations on the publication of Breaking. She loved it. What's been the best part of being a debut author, especially over this last couple of weeks while the book's been out in the wild?
Oh, that's a really good question, and it's been such a whirlwind. I barely have time to think about it. Um, I think honestly, it's the reader's reaction, because in this whole journey, I was so nervous about releasing my basically my soul to the world, because I wrote it not thinking anyone would ever read it. I wrote it into the ether, and then happily, Canella and my publishers picked it up. But so I was worried about criticism. I was worried about I suppose masquerading as a writer if I wasn't a writer. You have all this imposter fears that are probably completely normal. So the big surprise wasn't just that my friends and family liked it. It was genuinely people getting in touch and saying, "Oh, we loved the story," or we were up all night reading it. And I know it's probably a really standard answer that everyone gives, but I can't convey the thrill and the excitement and how heartwarming it is to have people enter this world that you've created and meet you in this world, and talk about the world. And that's why I'm so excited to actually talk to people about it. Even a lot of the reviewers, and I'm always like emailing them back and texting them back, and I'm like, "Oh, really, did you think of this, and what about that, and did you notice this?" And so that's been definitely a thrill, that I wasn't expecting to enjoy as much as I am. So yeah, that's been the best part.
Canelo put out some seriously amazing books as well, so you are in good company.
I was so lucky with them. I really was, and the team's been amazing. I've been really lucky along the way the whole time. So yeah, I'm just hoping that luck continues.
So, talking about Antonio, and you could publish like a novella maybe of like Antonio's next case or what happens to him after.
I think you nearly could. And I remember speaking to my editor about it, and because she was talking about possibly a sequel on book two onwards to book three, and because there's a female detective in that book that it might work quite well with the series. But I remember saying to her, "Oh, do you think Antonio should have a series?" Because I hadn't written it in that way, and she was like, "No, I think that's his story. I think that's his story." But now that I see the reaction, I'm curious what happens to Role, because I created him, and now I want him really to tell me what his next story is. So yeah, I mean, maybe just for fun, I should write a little continuation of what, because a lot of people felt that his story wasn't wrapped up, and I know they cared a lot about him, but I think that's sometimes the beauty of not fully wrapped up endings, is that you can imagine yourself what might have happened. You can really imagine that happy ending if you want yourself. And I left the book open across the board, including with Mirren, for that reason.
Yeah, there was some really there's a bit I really enjoyed in it, but I don't want to talk about it because it might be a spoiler, so we'll talk about it after. But so that one was set in Florida. You said particular reason why you chose Florida? Because I know you said in your head you imagine it being that Spanish beach where you were writing it.
Yeah. The whole way through, I imagined the Spanish beach, even the rocks, the way they were, and the hotel, the way it was. But the reason I kind of lifted it up and plonked it into Florida was because I wanted a detective who was speaking the same language as Mirren, metaphorically and literally. And I think Ireland has a very strong relationship with Florida in terms of, we've just always had a very strange, good relationship with America. And a lot of Irish people would have holidayed in Florida, and it was seen as the ultimate paradise for Irish people. So I guess I wanted to set that horror in the paradise from the Irish perspective as well. And that's why I wanted to have really like tropical beaches on the Florida side, and then the kind of ragged coastline of Ireland, and to have those contrasts as well. And I just didn't think it worked as well with Spain to have those contrasts as severe. And I knew that I wanted to have an island near a mainland as well, because I just felt that was important for the story to, yeah, to keep everything contained on an island, but to have the facility to have that bigger city within a boat ride anyway. So I'd also spent a lot of time in Florida when I was younger, and so around that area in particular. So I found it was really interesting to kind of revisit that in my imagination, and go back and write about it.
So is the island that you use a real island?
Say that again.
Is the island that you use a
So
real
the island Kite Island, there's an actual island called Kite Island, but I didn't know that until afterwards. I was looking up, I wanted to name this fictional island after a bird that was nearby. So I named it Kite Island because there was the birds in Florida are called kites. So I named this fictional island, and then it was only when I was halfway through the book, or maybe even further, that I realized there actually is an island called Kite. You think I would have Googled it? And you know, I probably did and just didn't find it. But and then there was another Osprey Island was going to be Marco Island, which is a real place in Florida. But then I just felt I hadn't actually been to Marco Island, and I just felt like I really wanted to write about places that I'd been, or else that were totally fictional. So that's the reason that it ended up. And I just left it as Kite Island once it was there, but yeah, there's no references to it being the actual place.
Yeah, so your one's kind of made up.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, even in terms of the geography of it and everything.
And with book 2, is that gonna be set overseas as well, or are you gonna set it in Ireland?
So that's set in Ireland. I was really enjoyed writing it. It's about a detective who's based in Dublin, and she's is going back to her hometown, which is in County Kerry, which is or said east west, which is southwest Ireland on the coast. And she goes back to a little town there where her family's from, and she kind of faces things that happen in her past as she's investigating this very mysterious house fire cold case. So I really enjoyed writing it set in Ireland. I nearly thought, oh, I should have the contrast with another country just because I'd already done that, and I kind of enjoyed the change in scenery when I'm writing. I quite because I do a lot of travel writing as well, so I always enjoy the travel aspect of writing. But actually, again, a little bit like Breaking, I liked that it was kind of intimate, that it was set in Ireland, and it was very not exclusively Irish, like as in it wouldn't exclude people who weren't Irish, but I enjoyed Ireland. I think I'm quite a folkloric writer. I enjoyed the superstition of Ireland and the scenery and how it can write about that. So I think it works quite well for this book in how I've created it.
You did bring in some myths and things into Breaking, didn't you? There's some stuff about, like, um, it's like Mirren's dad, isn't it, who was a fisherman, and, like, some stories there that are quite nice. I liked those little touches that were in the book.
I'm really glad you liked those. Like my parents were always big into like magical thinking, or they tried to really to spur on our imagination as children. And I remember driving down the countryside because I'm from Dublin, so we'd go on holidays down the countryside. I remember just driving the car. My parents would look out the window at these like patchwork fields, and they'd say, "Oh my God, look, there's leprechaun." And we'd look and we would see it. We would actually see it in our mind. Like we would imagine it so clearly that we'd see it, and we'd say, "Oh my God, I did see that." And we'd be exploring like fairy forts, and like you don't step on a fairy fort. And I still to this day wouldn't step on a fairy fort. It's just these very strong superstitions that we grew up with. Throwing the bath water out before it got dark. Um, Even now, if I spill salt, I'll throw it over my shoulder. And I think it was just nearly like a religion for a lot of people growing up. Like we'd hear the banshee at night. We wouldn't, but we would think we would. So a lot of those things were quite real to me. So when it came to writing, I thought it was just lovely to be able to weave those in some way. In a way that's quite unique to Ireland, I think. And all the stories growing up was about, yeah, the children of Lear and the swans and the giants and the battles. And yeah, I've always loved that side of it. So I just thought, well, it would be lovely to have them involved in this story, and also the power of it to shape thought, especially in small villages growing up. Like they really shaped Mirren as a character. So I thought that was kind of more unique than you might get in just a regular thriller, to have that aspect of it.
It definitely did add a sort of step to uniqueness, but it felt right with the characters. It felt that they would be thinking about that
Oh, good. I'm glad you think so.
and things. So you've got book 2 kind of well underway. Have you got thoughts about what's next?
Yeah, I've done while I was waiting for my edits on book two to come back. I've been slowly unfolding book three, which I think will be a little bit different, but still quite unique. So yeah, I can't say too much about that yet because I'm still teasing it out. Um, but I think, yeah, I think it'll be along the same similar lines in that, again, it'll be relationships and the impact of crime on relationships, because, well, I think that's what we're all very curious about. When something happens to somebody and you see it on the news, you kind of go, God, I wonder what, I wonder what makes him tick. Or, and even a lot of the Netflix series you're watching, I don't know about you, but I watch a lot of true crime, and I'm watching like the Jeffrey Dahmer case at the moment, which is pretty horrific. But this was fascination with, like, you look so normal, and yet there's so much going on under the surface. And I think we all have that type of curiosity, and I think that makes it very interesting for a fiction writer to create those characters with so many layers that you can peel back, and then imagine that they have a relationship with someone else who have their own layers. So yeah, and then you add in, an inciting incident, and it's just all very, yeah, it's all very colorful and exciting. So yeah, that's book three.
So because your books are quite kind of built on the family relationships and kind of responses to things, what kind of research did you have to do?
I've always been quite an observational type of person. Um, and I think as a journalist, you have to be. So I've interviewed a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances, and some really funny, happy, and finally stories that we used to do, where, you'd be at some, I don't know, some trade show, and you'd be in like a car, and, just kind of fluffy kind of stuff. And then some really, really, really harrowing cases of, that involved suicides, or, families being involved in very violent crime. And so I think I've always been fascinated by that. But research wise, I think just speaking to people, and, you'd be interviewing them about also human interest stories, and you're interviewing people who've had something happen to them, and they might want the message out there. Um, and so, yeah, I must have spoken to hundreds and hundreds of people separately about, in my job before, about things that have happened to them and the impact it's had on their lives. So I think it was very natural for me to lift that up and put it into fiction. And then play with it a little bit and add some superstition, or, Florida beach or whatever. So, but I think I've spent my whole life listening to people tell me about their heartache, which sounds really depressing, but actually, it's something I really enjoy, because I feel like I can help them in some way by getting their story out.
Did you have to look into kind of the procedures in Florida and things like that, like how Antonio would investigate?
Yeah, and that I was really lucky, because my best friend's husband is a retired police detective here in Ireland, and then my cousin in America, he lives in North Carolina, and he's a police officer and a former Navy SEAL, but he's in charge of writing all the police procedurals for missing children in America. So I thought that was just so serendipitous as well. So I sent him the manuscript, and we went through it in literally line by line. He's very detail oriented. And it was really interesting, because he said things like, "Oh no, they would get the drones up." And I was like, "Of course, the drones, and you can add those things in that really enhance the story." And I wouldn't have thought of, you get drones up to look for a missing child. And I'd originally written about, the Amber Alert immediately. But he was explaining that you don't use the Amber Alert immediately, because otherwise it would have no meaning, because children disappear for very innocent reasons a lot of the time. So he explained all the things, and then the bolos that you put out, the be on the lookouts, that you use, and then he went through the different stages of the investigation, and now what might happen, and now what would happen. So that in itself was just fascinating. I loved all that. And I think that I will definitely run everything past him or my best friend's husband each time, because I learned a lot myself.
It is handy, isn't it, having sort of someone that you can go and find advice from.
And of course, the about the media scrum and the media point of view, that was my lived experience as well when I worked in Sky News. And I was only quite junior in Sky News. I was working initially as an intern, and then I went on to as an on-screen reporter, but, not at a very high level. And but while I was working there, you'd be always in these huge media scrums outside. it was usually like outside the equivalent of the Parliament building. When you were talking to politicians or whatever, we'd be squished in the scrum, and people would be staring at whoever it was, and there's just a lot of scrutiny. And also a part of it, the research is just being a mom and just being like in the hairdressers and having someone say to me things like, "Oh God, that person, the high profile case, the real life high profile case that some people say the book is similar to." They would say things like, "Oh, that mother did it, like the rental car and everything. They definitely did it," and you'd just be like, "Really? Like, are we going here?" So everyone has an opinion, and I've been listening to all those opinions a lot along the years, but yeah, everyone wants it to be a bit juicier sometimes than it actually is.
Yeah, and I think there were sort of interesting ways that you kind of pointed towards people and sort of asked questions about like everyone in the story, which kind of kept you thinking all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I love personally reading stories where you're like, I don't know where this is going. Like, who is bad and who is good? And also, and maybe they're both. And maybe you can be light and dark, and maybe you can be good and bad, and maybe, and maybe you're bad for that reason because this is how you grew up, or you'd just never, what if you'd never learned how to be a good mother? Which I think is a really important question to ask because I mean, a lot of it can come instinctively, but what if you'd really never had that role model growing up? Would it make you bad, or would it just make you a bad mother, or what is a bad mother? So there was loads of these kind of questions that I just really enjoyed getting out on paper.
What's the reception been like to Breaking? It's been out a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, so really good, really positive. Um, the main feedback that I'm getting is we want more for Role, which is a good thing. Other than that, people are really blown away by the ending. I don't mean in a blow my own trumpet way, but in they weren't expecting that ending, and so I like hearing that because I would hate for people to go, oh, we guessed, or we knew, or I was always going to be that way. So I liked um I liked having that complicity with the reader as well. I thought that was nice, and that's what I'm connecting with people about now. When I'm getting feedback from people, we're all talking about the ending, which is in a way that I can't talk to you about it now. But um, so the reception's been better than I could have hoped for. Really,
And you said it's been optioned.
yes, we're delighted to say that it was optioned for TV series, probably a six-part series, by a UK production company that they feel like it'll work well in the US. So, I mean, I'm sure knowing talking to the authors that it doesn't mean it's going to be made. Um, it just means there's a chance of it being made, but it's still validation that what you've written and what you've imagined in your mind might someday make the screen, and that's really exciting. That's really special to me. So because these were just ideas that I had, and now they're people that could actually turn into actors and make a series. So that's been amazing.
It would work really well as a series, I think.
Yeah, I always thought of the affair, with the way there's a lot of wave scenery, or even Big Little Lies. Just those landscapes, like they were always kind of in my head as I was writing those, the crashing waves and the kind of uncertainties, what's going on, and that tension. I think would work well at the beach setting. So that was always the style I had. So when they said TV series rather than movie, I was again really delighted with that. Um, and then there was the kind of funny coincidence, whereas it's just a sign of how small Ireland is as well. So I put on social media that my dream people who would play the parts. For Mirren, it would probably be an Irish actress called Katrina Balfe, and for Role, it would be Holt McCannahy, he's a detective in Mindhunter. I don't know if you've watched Mindhunter, and he's also in Fight Club. And so I just put that out as that they'd be my dream people. And then I got a text from a friend of mine saying, "Hey Amanda, my husband's cousin is Holt McCannahy, and I've sent him your social media post. And here's what he said back." And then I got a little thing from Holt McCannahy, a text message saying, "Hey Amanda, I'm so flattered. Count me in to play the part when it makes it to the big screen someday." And I was just like, oh my, like it was all in jest, but I was like, oh my god, what are the chances of that happening? So little things like that are just they just make it all so fun along the way.
How did you celebrate your launch night? Debut launch night, what did you do?
It was so fun. I was really nervous though. We went to Hodges Figus, which is the Waterstones in Dublin city centre, and it was the bookshop that I'd gone to when I was in college. And it's this beautiful bookshop with like stairs, wooden stairs, and just big floors. And in college, I would just go there a lot and browse the books, and that's where I bought all my books. So it was really special that we could hold it there. And so my three children came in, they got all dressed up, and we got a cake, and all my family and friends came, and there was just a lovely amount of support. And yeah, and we did a Q&A with one of the Irish broadcasters, and my agent came over from the UK, and we had just such a lovely night. And then afterwards we went to a nearby bar, and we just had some champagne, and it was a Wednesday night, so it was never going to be raucous, but it was just a really special way just to mark that moment, because I'm not a big be in the limelight person. I'm a writer, so I've been always quite introverted, and I'm always quite a private person. So this is all very new to me. So like I even eloped to get married because I was like, I'm not having everyone stare at me on my big day. So I've always been kind of low key like that. So part of me was just so straining against having any big type of launch. Um, but I think I had to also let the book breathe and give the book its own credit for what it was. And these people what really wanted to come and support me. So, you know, in the end, I'm so glad that I did, because it was a great night and I was thrilled with the reception. But it took a lot for me to be there that night, I think.
How does that, because you were a journalist for Sky News and like on screen and things, how did you square that with wanting to kind of hide away?
That's interesting. Well, because I was never reporting on anything that was personal to me. So that was the first thing. And then when you've a camera in front of you, it's a lot different to like 100 expectant faces thinking, oh, she wrote a book, she must be really intelligent. Let's hear what she has to say. Go. And so that's very it's quite of a stark thing to stare into a room about. So and then radio, you're just in a room with headphones and a microphone. So you're not really you don't think about all those people that are listening, and the station I worked for was a national station, but I'm just not thinking of those people until the one day when I had a coughing fit on air, and then that was not fun. Um but so yeah, like I kind of thought, oh god, I should be more confident because I was a journalist and I'm a journalist. And I think that's why I went from TV to radio to writing, because writing is just, it gives yourself time to think. You can write I can write a structure my thoughts and my feelings so much better when I write. And I joke because when I have an argument with my husband, I type him emails. So if he's arguing with me, I'm like, just a second, and I'll just go and I'll be like typing him an email and paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, because I just find that my brain works better that way. I can express myself better. So that's why I think I turned to writing. And radio and TV was great, and I enjoyed it. But there was always an element of me feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but more comfortable because I was talking about other people's facts, not my own.
I guess though you could look at talking about your book as you're talking about the characters.
Yeah, it's true. And like, while it's not my story, I'm still telling Mirren's story and Role's story, but the words are extremely personal to me. Like those words come from like your soul. They really do. So I think with subsequent books that would be different. But this was, I think your debut is a very much, it's self-expression, and it's arguably the most creative you'll be, because you're putting the very first layer of yourself out there. And then when it's picked up, because when I said to you earlier, when I wrote it, I didn't write it because I was going to sell it as a book. I wrote it because I just felt the need to write these words. And then when it became something, then I was like, uh-oh, I'm going to have to actually make sure that I'm okay with these words being out there. So yeah, I don't think, and I was at a panel recently with Lisa Jewell. I was asking her how much of it is work to you and how much of it is a form of self-expression, and she was kind of confused by the question. But like, she's 21 books in, so she was a bit confused by the question in terms of, she was like, well, it's not self-expression, it's imagination, and it's work, and it's words, and it's fiction. But I couldn't relate to that part of it because it was my debut and it was so personal to me, those words. So I'm still, I suppose, at the very fledgling stage. is what I wanted to say in a very roundabout way.
That's a really good answer. Francesca's asked you, would you ever consider writing something in a genre other than crime or thriller? You're so great at characters. I'd love to see what else you might have up your sleeve.
That's so lovely. Thank you, Francesca. Um, I would love to write. Yeah, I would love to think I could write in other genres. I love writing romance, and I've only realized that recently. And I think if I kept writing, and keep going back to Role, but if I kept writing Role and Alice, and I'd love to just develop that, I really like writing about love and romance. And I suppose it's strange when I've just written about something quite harrowing, but I don't know. I suppose I just like provoking reaction in people, and there's something about love and romance that just really gets you in the gut. So yeah, I'd love to write something like that, but not like light-hearted romance. I still think I'd need some darkness to it.
That makes sense.
So
Uh,
not like an Emily Henry book.
Ian has said, uh, it's an interesting thought that the debut is kind of the most creative you'll be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean that in a depressing way, whereas that all my creativity went on my first book, but I meant that it's the most raw version of my creativity. Maybe not that it's the last vestiges of my creative, but it's the rawest version of it. It's the unpolished in a way, most unpolished of your creativity, and maybe that's what makes debuts so special, and you know that it is that people are interested in debuts because it hasn't yet been manufactured is the wrong word, but it hasn't been manipulated into anything else other than what it is. It's just the rawest form of your creativity initially, and then I think you'll eventually start seeing the inevitable patterns that you come out with your own writing. Um, but yeah, I think it is. I think debuts are different in that way.
Do you, because a lot of authors talk about the second book being kind of the most difficult. Like you've done it once and you've had that excitement of the debut and everything else, but then going back and having to do it again being like really difficult. Is that something you found doing book two?
Yeah, I'm a very instinctive person, and I kind of know myself, and I knew that would be difficult for me before I knew it was a thing, that there was second book syndrome. I didn't know about that, but as soon as I finished the first book and it was off being looked at by editors, I just knew. Oh no, I also just love writing. I just love it. So I knew that I just get going quickly, and I wanted the second book done before the first book came out because I wanted it to be free from any judgment of opinion. I didn't know how the first book would be received, so I just didn't want to write self-consciously. And again, it's down to that. Yeah, it's just, I suppose what it references back to the answer you just asked me, which is about being creative on your debut, is that it's you don't want any manipulation from any other places to influence your writing. I think that's what I meant about the debut being so special. But so the second book I wrote very quickly because I wanted to get those words out again unself-consciously. Um, and I did, and I really enjoyed writing the second book as much as I loved writing the first book. And that's, yeah, now we're two rounds of edits in, and I'm really enjoying it. So I think you just got to keep enjoying it, and I can't wait and the whole 2 weeks of the launch, which was brilliant, and I was doing a lot of media and it was great, and I was doing a lot of book clubs like this and I loved it. But I the whole time I'm just itching to get back to writing, just being creative. I just love that part of it.
I love that you're so excited about that and that book two is going to be brilliant because book one was great. So I'm really looking forward
Thank you. I'm just
to
a
book
nerd.
two. We've got a lot of comments about romances. Louise Jensen apparently writes thrillers and romances with a twist under another name. She says she needs the romances to be able to write the thrillers, so it could be done. Francesca says she'd read a romance by you. It's one of her favourite genres alongside crime, of course.
Oh, great.
I really like a romance. Kelly Clayton is an author that I really enjoy who's written a Regency kind of
Oh, I
romance,
love
but it
those.
has crime in it,
Oh, I
and it's
like that.
so, so, so good. Like, I love it because I think, like, an author who doesn't normally write in that brings something interesting to the genre.
Yeah, maybe I'll try that for book four.
Ian said it's true about the specialness of debuts, and yet in 20 years-ish of publishing, he's never heard it expressed so well.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
He said it's true about the specialness of debuts and rawness, etc., and yet in 20 years-ish of publishing, he's never heard it expressed so simply.
Oh yeah, so yeah. Um, I think yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it yet to know how it will all pan out. Um, but I definitely know that I just I want to write unencumbered with anything other than what I just want to say. So that's what I'm just going to try and do and see how it all goes. Who knows?
You're in a good place with like a good publisher as well, though, that will help and support.
Yeah.
And I
No, I
think
feel very
that's a good place
supported
to be
by
in.
that. Yeah. But I think
Mm.
I think as journalists, you kind of do have to write a lot, an awful lot. I said earlier, you're writing fluffy things and colorful things, and then you're writing harrowing things. So I think it was good practice. And I think if you're a good writer, which I hope I am, I think you should be able to write in different things. It's just maybe about what you enjoy writing as much, and what your measure of success is. Is it that you sell more books, or is it that you're loving what you're doing? So yeah, I think you have to really you just get a story and you just feel it out as well.
And then Francesca's asked you, what's a book so good that you wished you'd written it? Oh, and also, if any author you admire could read and love breaking, who would it be?
Oh, okay. So the answer to both of these are similar. So I'll answer the second part first. The author that I admire could read and love breaking. That already happened to me, and it was Ashio Dren from The Push, who wrote The Push, and she read my book quite early on and gave me a fantastic endorsement. So that was the best thing that ever could have happened, because that book that was so good I wish I'd written it was The Push. I just thought it just took that dark motherhood genre and just like the whole time I was reading it, I was just like, oh my God, which I think is really important to have in any book. So yeah, Ashley O'Dren, when it comes to those, and she was just a debut and was really, she's taken by surprise with her own success, which I always kind of liked, about her, that she was just like, oh my God, you like this book. Um, so that's probably one of them. And the other book that I absolutely love, but it's not fiction. It's Joan Didion, who writes she writes an essay style observational writing, and again I just love those essay style yeah, observations, really, just about life, and all the tiny little nuances that just can just make you feel something.
Francesca says she loved The Push, and it's a perfect endorsement for breaking.
Yeah, it is, it's similar, she's right in that you're just not sure if this mother character is bad or not.
While we're on other novels, my favourite question at the moment for an author chat is, what have you read recently that you've really enjoyed?
Ah, this is a good question. You think I'd have them all ready to answer? um when I was over at the Canelo offices recently, I was given some amazing books, and Marion Todd books as well. So I've really enjoyed those. And then I read a lot of Irish authors because I quite enjoy their writing. And Andrea Mara is somebody that I just love her books. Her one of her books recently was about again, it's similar, like that whole horrifying thing with having a child, but it's that the child is playing hide and seek, and then they just never come out. So that kind of stuff gives me absolute chills when I'm reading it. And then I loved Lessons in Chemistry. I read that, Bonnie Garmus, recently. And then I'm reading a lot of proofs for people as well, because so many writers helped me out and wrote lovely things about my book. So I'm hoping I can read their books as well, and find things that I love about them. So um, what else? Oh, and Jane Casey. I really like Jane Casey. I've just read one of her proofs, and I'm raging that it's not out until March, because then that means the next book is going to be even further away. So I'd really like writing sequels, and Stephanie Soden's another amazing writer that I've really enjoyed her books. Um, yeah,
Good range of people there. I like Marion Todd's books. And
yeah.
Bonnie Garmus is another sort of amazing sort of breakout debut.
Yeah. Oh my God, her writing's just so
Lessons in
sharp. I
Chemistry.
loved it. And I just when I was sick recently, I read Verity, Colleen Hoover. I read that in like 3 hours when I was sick the other day. And I just find it fascinating the success that she's had. Um, so I didn't love that as much as I've loved some of her other books. But I'm always reading it going, how, like, what is it that people like? What is it that, what's the magic formula that seems to just have people falling over themselves to read it? And I think it's that she describes emotional connections quite well.
Well, Colleen Hoover sort of has risen to popularity through TikTok, hasn't
Yeah,
she? How
yeah.
have you found sort of doing the social media bits of an author?
That was a really good lead into that question. Um,
Thanks.
so I love I like I said, I'm a private person, so I was always very protective over what I would put on social media, and just had small family and friends involved. But then when I knew what the book was coming out, and I did want to shout about it, and I've loved the creative side of Instagram. Like, surprisingly, like making reels and adding music and adding whatever themes I can. So I've really enjoyed that side of it. And I found that a kind of a creative outlet too, where you can just be a bit fun with it. Because I suppose when you're writing crime, when you're writing about quite dark things, you do need to kind of have some levity. TikTok, I have a profile. I'm trying, but I feel like I'm an old person trying to do something that I shouldn't be doing, but I know I should be. Um, I was interviewing somebody for the magazine that I write for, about finfluencers and how influencers in finance are the next big thing, talking to people about like 1 minute videos on how to get a mortgage, that type of thing. And she knows everything about TikTok and about Instagram. And she kind of inspired me to go back and redo my TikTok and see if I could just, be a bit more creative with it. I think I just don't know enough about it. So yeah, she's inspired me to go back and do things, because it is so, it does influence people, I suppose, and that's what you want.
I tried. I have a TikTok account. I spent about 2 minutes on it and decided I was A, too epileptic to watch the videos because they all played instantly and made me feel a bit sick, and also too old. I
I
was
just
just
felt
like,
old.
"Nope."
But I see other authors doing it really successfully, and I'm just like, okay, Mandy, you can do this. Just do what they do, and then just gonna make me sound like so bad. How do they move their lips in time to the words at the start? Like, do they practice that? I don't know how they do that. Maybe it's just some kind of thing they add on, like a filter. That I don't see. I don't know. I don't. I need my 12-year-old to help me.
Yeah, and so the best plan is to get your kids to help probably. They're gonna know how
Yeah.
to do TikTok better.
But they're so mean. They're like, Mom, you said you're happy with like 500 views. Mr. Beast has 5 million views. And you're like, who's Mr. Beast? It's like all these YouTubers that they're obsessed with. So yeah, they're kind of mean, but they're going to have to help me.
Ian has asked, he says, "Is he right that Glenn Mead is someone you know? He absolutely loves his books too."
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, Glenn Mead, it's a funny story. So Glenn Mead was my mentor, which I probably should have mentioned earlier in the fact that he was quite instrumental to me writing the book. Because during lockdown, when I was just sitting there homeschooling in homeschool hell, um, I decided then to write the book because Glenn Mead is Irish, and he writes his books, and they're mostly set in America, and they're quite big on action, and they're quite intricate as well, and they delve into such amazing history. They're amazing books. So my husband was he manages properties, and he was at the supermarket, or at the equivalent of I don't know, we have Duns here, and it's like Tesco or something, and he was loading loads and loads of bed sheets into the boot of his car, like load, cramming them in. And then the man in the car beside him was just like looking at him in horror, and just went, excuse me, do you mind if I just ask you what you're doing? And my husband was like, oh, I manage properties and everything. And it ends up being Glen Mead, and he was like, oh, I have a property that I'd love you to manage. And so he became his client. And then my husband came home and was like, oh, I'm managing the property for this very famous author. And so I hadn't heard of Glen Mead, but I was looking him up, and I was like, oh my God, he is really big. And so that relationship began. And then we were in lockdown, and I was saying to my husband, I think I'd just love to write a book, but I just don't know where to start. And he was like, why don't I ask Glen Mead, would he see if he could see some of your writing and see what you think? And I was like, oh God, okay. And so that's how Glenn became my mentor. And so he was brilliant. So every couple of weeks he'd ask me to email him some of the chapters, and he's very busy, like he has a lot going on. And he lives in America for most of the time anyway. And so I was just so grateful to him that he would jump on Zoom and do calls with me and be like, okay, brilliant, but put it into the present tense, or tighten that up, or would we really say that? Or, loads of really great tips along the way. So I really valued his advice. And he was the one who kind of said, listen, you can write and you can do this, which was a huge thing for anyone starting out. And he's still my friend to this day. Actually, he's emailed me today. He's great.
That's really good. And it must help having someone like that giving you sort of confidence to carry on.
Yeah, I think it gave you permission because I was asking him permission to be part of this world because as I saw it, I'm just a journalist, and I just think when you say to people, I'm writing a book, like it can sound really like pompous or silly or indulgent or something. Like there is just that thing that you feel when you say that. Well, I didn't really tell anyone I was doing it anyway, but speaking to Glenn, he was very much like, you can write and you can do this and you've got this and it's shaping up and great. But he didn't in any way help me with the plot or anything. Just to be clear, he didn't write the book for me. But he would just hold me accountable. He'd be like, okay, now write it again. Now write it again. Now do this chapter again. And so that's really helpful when you don't know what you're doing and you're right, like I said earlier, you're writing into the ether and you don't even know if you're ever going to get it seen the light of day.
Well, we've got Laura watching because she's commented further down. I'm going to ask Laura's favourite question, which is, have you ever acted out a scene while you were writing one of while you were writing your book?
Okay, so I didn't like sit there with dialogue or anything, but but it's funny because today my husband caught me just sitting like this, staring at the fire, because I was trying to think of another way to describe fire because in the second book it's involving a house fire, and I was just like staring at the fire, trying to like come up with ways. So, or my daughter would laugh at me because she'll just see me and I'd be like doing this in my arm or something, and I'd be just seeing how I'm moving it so that I can write it, or so in ways like that. Yeah, I would act it out. Um, Often if I'm writing about beach scene, I'd have to go to a beach, any beach, and sit down and absorb it. And they say like you write a book on your walk, or you don't write your book at your desk, you write it everywhere else. And for me, that's very true. I find it hard to describe unless I'm seeing what it is that I'm describing. So while I don't act out scenes as such, I definitely yeah, I kind of do act out scenes actually now that I think about it. Yeah, if I'm writing it, I'm like, yeah, I'd have to move things around to see how I would talk. Oh, yeah, or I'd often go something like, or stretch it and be like, hey, what do I do if I'm relaxing? And then I'd write it. So yeah, I suppose I do. There's a lot of things that I don't know yet because I'm just so new to it all.
Well, these are all good answers. It's a good answer. We like it's a one of the questions we like because everyone always has an interesting
I
answer.
think as well as I'm talking, like I'm learning about myself. So now the next time I'm asked that, I'll know the answer to that. But I think that's what's nice about being a debut. You're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me if that's okay.
I think you're doing a good job as a debut, though. You seem to have the answers down for a lot of things. You've got some really good ways of talking about your work. Do you think being a journalist helped you when you were going into writing?
Yeah, I think I've always been a storyteller, and through obviously through sound and through footage first, and then writing. But yeah, like I said earlier, the way I was able to, like, I'd have to interview and relate to a lot of people about things that normally would never happen in you or me's day to day life, like really extraordinary situations I'd find myself in. Um, and I remember coming out of one particularly very, very difficult interview where this family had had a very tragic thing happen to them. And I remember coming out of the house and nearly keeling over. I was just so heartbroken for them. And ringing my sister, and my sister studied medicine. And I said to her, I was like, how do you deal with these things? It's so sad. And she was like, it's your job. And she said, but also get into your car and cry for 15 minutes because you're also a human and this is humanity. And but she said, get into your car, cry, deal with it, and then wipe your face and do your job. And I thought that was, that was the level that I was doing in the job as a journalist. So you're coming across these situations that you never normally would. And so I think for a writer that's quite enriching because then you can not to use is the wrong word. That doesn't sound very nice, but I suppose you can you could just write around them in ways that you've more control of, because I had no control in any of those stories, and you just, your heart would break for people. And so when it came to writing, I was like, okay, now I have an element of control over this. I can make things happen, and I can make better endings or worse endings. You'd have to read the ending of the book to know.
Your sister must have been a good kind of port of call for Merrin's job then.
Yeah, and she's definitely in my head as well. I mean, I think they say your characters are a mix of a lot of people that whether you admit it or not. But no, not the mean part. But yeah, she's. I mean, she's a mom, and she was a doctor. So I think, I mean, she's not a doctor at the moment because she has small children. Um, but she was very instrumental in a lot of the hospital scenes. I'd run things past her, and she would explain, because Mirren is studying medicine as the book unfolds. So she was very great with some of her points of view.
Yeah, and that's another one where you've got someone kind of on tap that you can just go and ask questions to, which must have
Yeah,
been
you nearly don't even realize of the things that you have around you that you can use to make yourself convince to create a convincing story.
We've got 4 minutes left.
What? How did that happen?
I know. Do you have a copy of Breaking that you can show off to remind
Yeah.
people? Give us a bit of a recap of the story for everyone who's watching so they know what to buy.
So this is the story, and it's the story of an Irish mother who loses her daughter, her 8-year-old daughter Alana, on a beach in the Florida Keys, and she's in a beach bar drinking at the time. So the media and the public aren't too happy with her, and then smartphone footage emerges of the day, and then things kind of turn on their head a little bit, and there's things seem a little bit more sinister than they are. And then Detective Antonio Role is a US detective, and he's tasked with finding the little girl. And he's just an all round lovable guy who is just trying to do the best for himself and for everybody around him. But I absolutely love the back of the book. It's probably all backwards to you, but um, it just says here, Mirren loves her daughter. She doesn't know who took her. She wants her back. And then the last sentence is, one of these statements is a lie. And I just got chills when I read that, which came back from the publisher. It was amazing.
It
Um,
is, and I
and
love the cover. The
yeah, the
cover
cover is
art
beautiful.
is really good as well.
I just loved the dark to light. I just think that was so, and then breaking is so like breaking news and just jumps out at you. And then I think the order on the sunbeds is just such a great contrast to the chaos that's lies in the depths of the sea and the story. But I thought yeah, I was so happy with the cover, and I just think the book looks lovely, and it's a lovely way to package my words, I think.
Mills has said this group is dangerous for a bank account.
Oh, thanks. I see
Does a
someone
habit of
there.
she has a
Laura said
habit.
she loved hide and seek. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you did that for friend Andrea Mara's book. It's yeah, it's really good.
Um, Hopefully people will be going away now to go and buy Breaking if they haven't already done so.
I'm glad we didn't do any spoilers, because it is kind of hard to talk about without spoiling it, isn't it?
It really is. And I was thinking there's like things that I wanted to ask about and I was like, I can't because it's like too far in the book or
You can just DM me, yeah, because I have a question I want to ask people about the ending that I can't now, but it's what I ask everybody, and the answers are really surprising to me. So if anyone wants to get in touch and DM me, I'm happy to discuss it at any stage.
yeah, maybe that's yeah, those are the ones for off screen questions.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe I'll just go on TikTok and be all cool and answer all the questions there.
But all that's left to say from that is thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.